So, social inclusion services of SEPs include supplementary feeding programs, healthcare and education, worksite, nursery, facilities for working mothers, shelter homes for persons with disability, housing assistance for those affected by disasters, setting up of community-based systems of water, health and sanitation, natural resource management, and disaster risk reduction. So these are just some examples of the social inclusion services. And in the Philippines, 38% of the SEPs provided this. And this is interesting, next slide please, because actually, among the Philippine SEPs providing group-directed transformational services to the poor, this figure is supplemented by the community-based organizations set up by the SEPs that actually engage government and other institutions to set up the community-based water systems of health centers or build public infrastructure such as roads and electrification rather than being directly provided by the SEPs themselves. What does this mean? When the SEPs provide transformational services and they create organizations such as cooperatives or associations that become actors in their own development, it is these cooperatives and associations that engage their local government, that engage other actors in the community in order for them to get these services. So it is not a direct provision of the SEPs, but it's actually a result of the organization of the poor, the association or the cooperative already doing it themselves because they have been enabled by the SEPs. And then the other thing is, I'd like to say that social inclusion and transformational services of SEPs are neither market-based or market-driven. They may be regarded as services in the public, not the private realm, and they're financed from the profits or surplus of SEPs or by a third party. We found that SEPs also received some grants, public and private, and some companies practicing CSR actually also provide them, but this is for the social inclusion services and for the training and development services. So, in the sense, one of the main findings that we had was that SEPs are actually hybrid organizations. Hybrid organizations that operate both in the market and in the social economy at the same time. So they need to be understood as such so that they can be assisted effectively. No? So many of the laws that actually government and Senator Bam was actually talking about are actually laws that help to make transactional services efficient, and that is good. However, we need to actually ensure that transactional services are also complemented by social inclusion services as well as transformational services to make poverty reduction a social entrepreneurship agenda and a goal. So, here are some of the telling results. No? The measurement of social outcomes was a major weakness identified by SEPs. It was a major weakness whether among evolving or developed SEPs. 62% of Philippine SEPs consider it as one of the top 3 internal challenges faced, and 16% of Philippine SEPs, only 16% of Philippine SEPs have started to invest in using specific tools. 4 microfinance institutions were starting to use progress out of poverty, but mainly as a targeting tool, not yet to measure social outcomes. And a new generation social enterprise has started to invest in an SROI study. This is actually Gandang Kalikasan working with us to do an SROI study. And the research, from the research, we got indications of positive outcomes on the poor, but we could not ascertain, impact in that sense, no? Because most of the poor, most of the SEPs do not measure their outcomes. That's why also it was the perception of CEOs and reports that we got indicators of outcome. Next slide, please. So the outcome indicators that may be considered in developing social impact measurement tools for SEPs include this. No? So increased, diversified, and sustainable sources of income, improved self-esteem, self-image, self-worth, improved position and participation in value chains and markets, improved access to social and community services, increase in assets, increased capacity to cover basic household needs and improve the quality of life, improved status of women in the community, increased capacity for self-governance and to contribute to community development and movement out of poverty. So as I said, these were the indications of impact that we got, but we couldn't get any statistics, no? Because as I said, there's no measurement of most of the SEPs. Next slide, please. Okay, but in terms of SEP's potential for scaling up impact, let me just show you what our Philippine SEPs sample showed. No? The outreach, the combined outreach of approximately 2.5 million was actually the combined outreach of the 32 SEPs. Mind you, these were just 32 SEPs, okay? And this already covers 30 to 60% of poor families in the Philippines. If you just go by statistics, and then if you say, but what we found was 90% of this outreach was accounted to microfinance institutions. So the biggest outreach were being done by microfinance institutions. The other interesting thing is in terms of asset size, at setup, the median size of the asset base of the 32 SEPs was actually micro. But now, as of 2012, when we finished the study or the survey, the median size of their asset base had reached medium scale. So this shows you the potential for growth. No? So they started as micro. The median is now medium. Let's talk about partnerships. In the Philippines, the thing is, most of the SEPs mainly partnered with CSOs and social enterprises, even for financing and marketing. That's actually a very sad story, because it's also SEPs and other NGOs that provide even services that should be provided better, maybe, by businesses or by government. So I'm actually glad that the current bills of Senator Aquino that are going to be implemented would make transactional services more efficient, because SEPs also need that. So that's the result in other countries. But there's much room for increasing and enhancing partnerships with the three sectors towards scaling up impact on the poor. So next slide, please. So what are the recommendations coming from this study? Yeah. All the recommendations are actually geared towards scaling up impact of SEPs to scale up the impact of poverty reduction and women economic leadership, And so the first recommendation is to build a strong learning community among SEPs and support institutions. This is actually to systematically address the key internal and external challenges that I showed you. And such learning community needs to address learning knowledge creation, because SEPs are actually hybrid organizations. We cannot just do as the markets do, or the institutions in markets do. We need to create our own ways of doing things. We need to be innovative. We need innovation in all our different aspects of management. We need capacity development, we need learning exchange, and we need partnership building between and among SEPs and support institutions. And we found that it may be good that this is done not only within countries, but actually among countries as well. Because there's a very rich learning opportunity between the Philippines and other countries in terms of developing the community of SEPs. Next slide, please. The second recommendation is to develop strategic partnerships between SEPs and civil society. Social inclusion and transformational services are the strength of civil society organizations. And so, when you look at the biggest segment of SEPs, which is actually microfinance institutions, and you look at the biggest number of growing SEPs, which is actually the new generation social enterprises, they have a lot to do in terms of transformational and social inclusion services. So strategic partnerships with civil society organizations and SEPs are actually going to go a long way creating greater impact on the poor. At the same time, civil society organizations right now are actually having a difficult time because no more donors, right? If only cooperatives, microfinance institutions can start tapping into the expertise in civil society organizations that are now naghihikapos dahil wala ng pera, then maybe that partnership can create revenue streams for CSOs to actually become more vibrant again. Next slide, please. Pursue transformational partnerships between SEPs, government, and business towards scaling up impact on the poor. This is premised on the recognition of SEPs as change agents and hybrid organizations seeking to transform the lives of the poor. And so government and business institutions need to be convinced that SEPs are hybrid organizations, that they're not just market creatures. Because if we continue to look at SEPs as just market institutions, we'll say, oh, there are all government programs all over the place for them. If our objective is not just creation of jobs, but actually poverty reduction, we need to invest in transformational services. And it's important that we're able to convince government that it's not just market-based services that SEPs need. That what SEPs need are actually transformational services to be provided to the poor in order for us to become effective partners in poverty reduction. So we need to convince government and business institutions to change policies and practices that have not worked in favor of the poor. I was just telling you about the usual practice that is accepted in the industry, in the retail industry, which works negatively, not only among SMEs, MSMEs, but also among social enterprises, And there has to be strategic innovations to support the scaling of things. And the poverty reduction through social entrepreneurship bill actually codifies a set of changes that need to happen that combine transactional, transformational, and social inclusion services to be provided to the poor by SEPs. And it's not just the transactional side. So the other thing is, when SEPs actually are assisted by companies practicing CSR, this can broaden and deepen the CSR programs of businesses. And strategic partnerships with business organizations, such as inclusive businesses and impact investment platforms, could go a long way for a more comprehensive support for SEPs. So I'm also all for Senator Aquino's proposal that we actually increase the linkages between social enterprises and inclusive businesses, because I think that's good. And the last slides that I'd like to actually show you are the proposal to co-create a vibrant SEP sector as key actor in a post-2015 development agenda and process. As we all know, 2015 was the end of of the Millennium Development Goals. We're entering a new era, 2016 to 2030. What is on the table are now sustainable development goals. And sustainable development goals of the UN are not just talking about poverty reduction. It's talking about poverty elimination. And we are to actually effectively reach poverty elimination by 2030. It's important that we work together.